The sound of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Gwendolyn Hayes ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. Blood stained her once pristine dress, though none of it was hers. The year was 1875, and she'd just killed a man, the same man who'd murdered her father in cold blood 6 months prior. Justice served, they might say, but as she clutched her trembling hands together, she knew the law wouldn't see it that way. "Lord Almighty," she whispered, watching as the townsfolk began to gather around the body she'd left in the street. Nathaniel Collins had been a respected businessman to most, but Gwendolyn knew the truth. He was a ruthless criminal who'd swindled her father out of their family ranch before putting a bullet in his chest when he threatened to expose Collins' operation. Gwendolyn slipped away in the confusion, racing toward the livery stable where her horse was tethered. At 24, she'd never imagined becoming an outlaw, but here she was, about to flee the only home she'd ever known. Her mother had passed years earlier, and now with her father gone and her hands stained with vengeance, she had nothing left in Redemption Creek. She swung onto her mare and dug her heels in, racing out of town as the shouts of the sheriff's men faded behind her. The vastness of the Arizona Territory stretched before her, a landscape as unforgiving as her circumstances. 3 weeks of hard riding brought Gwendolyn to the remote town of Copper Canyon. Her supplies were nearly depleted, and the wanted posters bearing her likeness had begun appearing in the settlements she passed through. She needed somewhere to lie low, somewhere to disappear. The saloon was her first stop, not for drink, but for information. In these places, folks talked, and she needed to know if news of her crime had reached this far west. She kept her hat low as she slipped through the swinging doors, the cacophony of piano music, drunken laughter, and clinking glasses washing over her. She traded her bloodied dress for men's clothes in a desperate attempt at disguise, binding her chest and tucking her auburn hair beneath her hat. The bartender barely glanced at her as she ordered whiskey, sliding a coin across the worn wooden counter. "Passing through," he asked, pouring the amber liquid. "Looking for work," she responded, deepening her voice. "Anything available in these parts?" The bartender gestured toward a table in the corner where a man sat alone, studying what appeared to be maps. "Quinn Zimmerman's hiring hands for his ranch. Pays fair from what I hear." Gwendolyn nodded her thanks and took her whiskey to a shadowed corner. She observed the man from beneath the brim of her hat. He was tall, even-seated, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a jaw that looked carved from stone. She estimated him to be in his early 30s, though life on the frontier aged a person in ways the city never could. After finishing her drink, she approached his table with measured steps. "Heard you're looking for hands," she said, maintaining her disguised voice. Quinn Zimmerman looked up, piercing blue eyes assessing her with a shrewdness that made her wonder if her disguise was as effective as she'd hoped. "I am," he finally said. "You know how to work cattle. I was raised on a ranch," she answered truthfully. "I can ride, rope, and mend fences with the best of them." "You look a bit slight for the heavy work," he observed. "I'm stronger than I look." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I reckon most folks are," he gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit. What's your name, boy?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought of a male alias. "George," she said quickly. "George Hamilton." "Well, George Hamilton, I've got 300 head of cattle that need moving to the northern pasture before winter sets in. Job's yours if you want it. $1 a day plus meals and a bunk in the ranch house." "I'll take it," she said, perhaps too eagerly. "Good, we ride out at dawn." He rolled up his maps and stood, revealing his full height. He towered over her, and for a moment, Gwendolyn felt a flicker of fear. If he discovered who she really was, what she'd done, she'd be at his mercy. But she needed this job, needed somewhere to hide. She'd just have to be more careful than she'd ever been. The next morning, Gwendolyn arrived at the designated meeting spot outside town, her mare saddled and her few belongings packed. Quinn was already there with 2 other men who he introduced as Hector and Silas, longtime hands on his ranch. "This here's George," Quinn told them. "New hire, treat him fair." The men nodded, though Silas eyed her suspiciously. He was an older man with a white beard and eyes that seemed to see too much. "Bit young, ain't he?" Silas asked. "Old enough to work," Quinn replied. "Let's ride." The journey to Quinn's ranch took most of the day, winding through canyons and across open plains. As they crested a final hill, Gwendolyn caught her first glimpse of the Zimmerman ranch, a sprawling property nestled in a fertile valley, with a large main house, several outbuildings, and grazing cattle dotting the landscape. "Welcome to the Z-Bar," Quinn said, noticing her expression. "Been in my family for 20 years. My pa built it from nothing." "It's impressive," she said sincerely, momentarily forgetting to deepen her voice. Quinn gave her an odd look, but said nothing as they rode down to the ranch house. There they were greeted by a woman in her 50s who Quinn introduced as Martha, the housekeeper and cook. "Martha, this is George. He'll be bunking in the east room." Martha looked Gwendolyn over with a critical eye. "That one's got too much dust on him for my clean sheets." "Bath first, then dinner." Panic surged through Gwendolyn. A bath would reveal her deception immediately. "I can wash up in the creek," she stammered. "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "There's hot water ready in the washroom. Go on now." Quinn seemed to sense her discomfort. "Let the boy wash up his own way, Martha. He's been riding hard." Martha huffed but relented, and Gwendolyn shot Quinn a grateful look. She'd have to find a way to bathe privately if she was going to maintain this charade. That evening, after a hearty meal that reminded her painfully of her father's cooking, Gwendolyn retreated to her assigned room. It was small but comfortable, with a single bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the eastern pasture. She locked the door and finally allowed herself to unbind her aching chest, breathing deeply for the first time in hours. She was exhausted but too wary to sleep soundly. Every creak of the old house sent her hand to the pistol hidden beneath her pillow. She'd killed once. She hoped never to do so again, but she'd defend herself if discovered. Dawn came too soon. And with it, the challenges of maintaining her disguise while performing the backbreaking work of a ranch hand. Quinn worked alongside his men, and Gwendolyn found herself admiring his leadership. He was firm but fair, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. Days stretched into weeks, and Gwendolyn fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She managed to bathe in the creek under cover of darkness and kept mostly to herself, though Silas continued to watch her with narrowed eyes. Quinn, meanwhile, seemed to deliberately keep his distance, assigning her tasks that took her away from the main house. One evening, about a month into her employment, Quinn found her mending a saddle on the porch. "You handle leather well," he observed, settling into a chair beside her. "My father taught me," she said, then winced at the softness in her voice. "You miss him." It wasn't a question. She nodded, keeping her eyes on her work. "He was a good man." "What happened to him?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous as a rattlesnake. "He died," she finally said. "I'm sorry to hear that." Quinn's voice was genuinely sympathetic. "My pa passed 2 years ago. Heart just gave out one morning. Ma followed him 6 months later. Folks said it was grief that took her." Gwendolyn glanced up, surprised by his openness. "You loved them very much. They were everything to me." He studied her face in the fading light. "You know, George, whatever you're running from, it won't follow you here. The Z-Bar has a way of healing folks." Before she could respond, a shout came from the bunkhouse. Silas emerged, waving a piece of paper. "Quinn, you'll want to see this." Quinn excused himself and went to Silas, taking the paper from the older man's hand. Even from a distance, Gwendolyn recognized it as a wanted poster. Her blood turned to ice as Quinn examined it, his expression darkening. When he looked up, his eyes found hers, and she knew with terrible certainty that her time at the Z-Bar was over. She bolted, rushing to her room to grab her few belongings and her gun. She was halfway to the stables when Quinn caught up to her, his hand closing around her arm. "Let me go." She hissed, trying to wrench away. "Not until you tell me why Gwendolyn Hayes is pretending to be a boy on my ranch," he said quietly, his grip firm but not painful. She froze. "How long have you known?" "Since the day you arrived." No man I've ever met has hands as small as yours or walks with such a careful step. He released her arm. What I don't know is why you shot Nathaniel Collins or why you're running instead of standing trial. Tears burned in her eyes. He killed my father. Took everything from us, and when Pa threatened to expose his crimes, Collins put a bullet in him and called it self-defense. She straightened her shoulders. So I did the same to him. Quinn's expression remained unreadable. The poster says you're wanted for cold-blooded murder. Of course it does, she said bitterly. Collins had the law in his pocket. No one would listen when I tried to tell the truth, so I took justice into my own hands. She met his gaze defiantly. Turn me in if you want, but know that the man I killed deserved what he got. After what seemed an eternity, Quinn spoke. I'm not turning you in. What? I said I'm not turning you in. But you can't stay here as George. The poster's all over town now. Someone will recognize you. Then I'll go, she said, reaching for her saddlebag. I've imposed on your kindness long enough. Or, he said slowly, you could stay as yourself. She stared at him. What do you mean? Martha's been after me to hire a housekeeper's assistant. You'd be inside most of the time, away from prying eyes. And he hesitated, then continued, the ranch needs a woman's touch, has since Ma passed. You do that for me. Why? Quinn's gaze softened. Because I believe you, Gwendolyn Hayes, and because everyone deserves a second chance. The following day, George Hamilton mysteriously departed the Z Bar, and Quinn introduced Martha to Gwendolyn Hayes, a distant cousin come to help around the house. Martha, either convinced by the story or choosing not to question it, welcomed the extra hands. Gwendolyn's transition from ranch hand to housekeeper's assistant was not without challenges. The physical labor was different but no less demanding, and maintaining the pretense of being Quinn's cousin required careful attention to their interactions. But for the first time since her father's death, she felt safe. As autumn deepened toward winter, Gwendolyn settled into life at the Z Bar. She helped Martha with cooking and cleaning, mended clothes, and occasionally assisted with the bookkeeping, putting her father's lessons to good use. Quinn kept his distance publicly, but privately they began to form a cautious friendship. One evening, after Martha had retired, Quinn invited Gwendolyn to join him by the fire. You're good with numbers, he observed as she reviewed the ranch ledgers. Pa insisted I learn. Said a woman should be able to manage her own affairs. He was right. Quinn poured them each a small glass of whiskey. My mother ran this place as much as my father did. He might have broken the land, but she made it profitable. Gwendolyn accepted the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. You must miss them terribly. Every day, he settled back in his chair. Tell me about your father. So she did, sharing stories of Thomas Hayes and their small ranch outside Redemption Creek. She told Quinn about her mother's death from fever when Gwendolyn was 16, and how she and her father had managed afterward until Nathaniel Collins arrived with his smooth talk and false promises. Collins wanted our water rights, she explained. Our land bordered the creek above his mining operation. When Pa refused to sell, Collins forged documents claiming Pa had borrowed money he couldn't repay. The local judge was in Collins' pocket, so the case went his way. When Pa threatened to take evidence of the forgery to the territorial governor, Collins shot him. Her voice hardened. I spent 6 months gathering proof and planning, then I confronted him in broad daylight. That took courage, Quinn said quietly, or foolishness. Now I'm a wanted woman. What would you do if you weren't running? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Before all this, I dreamed of having my own place someday. A small ranch, nothing grand, just somewhere that was mine. She stared into the fire. Seems impossible now. Nothing's impossible, Quinn said. Redemption comes in many forms. She gave a bitter laugh. Redemption is for saints, Mr. Zimmerman, not killers. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half smile. Then you ain't met me yet, Miss Hayes. He leaned forward, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I've done things I'm not proud of. We all have. But I believe the measure of a person isn't their worst deed, but what they do after. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Gwendolyn found herself studying Quinn's face, noticing for the first time the tiny scar at the corner of his right eye, the way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way that city men could never achieve. "You're staring," he said softly. "I'm trying to figure you out," she admitted. "Why you'd risk harboring a fugitive? Maybe I'm just a fool for a pair of pretty eyes." The teasing lightness of his tone didn't mask the sincerity beneath. Gwendolyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I should get some rest," she said, rising abruptly. "Thank you for the whiskey and for everything." He stood as well, suddenly close enough that she could smell the leather and pine scent of him. "Sleep well, Gwendolyn." That night, her dreams were filled not with the haunting image of Collins falling to the dusty street, but with piercing blue eyes and the rumble of Quinn Zimmerman's voice saying her name. As winter settled over the ranch, bringing shorter days and long, cold nights, Gwendolyn found herself spending more time in Quinn's company. They shared meals by the fire, played chess, which she usually won, and talked of books and ideas. She learned that he'd been educated back east before returning to take over the ranch, that he preferred poetry to novels, and that despite his success, he sometimes felt the weight of his parents' legacy pressing down on him. In turn, she shared her love of astronomy, taught to her by her mother, and her skill with horses inherited from her father. Careful pieces of herself, offered like fragile gifts, the arrival of December brought heavy snow, isolating the ranch from town. Martha fretted about Christmas preparations, insisting they needed supplies from town. "I'll go," Quinn volunteered. "The pass should still be navigable." "Not alone," Gwendolyn said firmly. "The weather's too unpredictable." "She's right," Silas agreed. "Take someone with you." Quinn's eyes met Gwendolyn's. "Care for a ride to town, cousin?" The journey to town was treacherous but exhilarating. Bundled in heavy coats, they guided their horses through snow-covered trails, the world around them transformed into a glistening white wilderness. Conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences. They reached town by midday, the streets quiet under a blanket of snow. Quinn tied their horses outside the general store. "Stay close," he warned. "The wanted posters are still up." Gwendolyn pulled her scarf higher over her face and kept her head down as they entered the store. The warmth inside was welcome after the biting cold. While Quinn discussed orders with the shopkeeper, she browsed the shelves, pausing at a display of hair combs and ribbons she would never have worn as George. "See something you like?" Quinn asked, appearing beside her. She quickly moved away from the feminine items. "Just looking." His eyes softened. "You're allowed to be a woman, you know, am I?" she murmured. "Sometimes I forget what that means." Later, as they were loading their purchases onto the pack horses, a voice called out from across the street. "Quinn Zimmerman, thought that was you." Gwendolyn tensed as a man in a sheriff's badge approached. Quinn placed a reassuring hand at the small of her back. "Sheriff Miller," Quinn greeted. "How are you? Can't complain. Who's this?" The sheriff nodded toward Gwendolyn. "My cousin Gwendolyn. She's staying at the ranch for a spell." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Madam," he turned back to Quinn. "Say you heard about that Hayes woman, the one who killed Nathaniel Collins." Gwendolyn's heart pounded so loudly she was certain both men could hear it. "Can't say I have," Quinn replied evenly. "What about her?" "Word is she's been spotted near Phoenix. Got a new wanted poster yesterday." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Rewards up to $500 now." Quinn took the paper, studying the crude sketch. "Doesn't look like anyone I've seen." "Well, keep an eye out." "Woman like that's dangerous." The sheriff glanced at the darkening sky. "You folks better head back before the weather turns." "We will. Take care, Sheriff." As they rode out of town, Gwendolyn's hands trembled on the reins. "Phoenix," she said. "That's south of here." "Someone's leading them on a false trail," Quinn said. "Buying you time." "But who would do that?" Quinn shrugged. "Someone who believes in second chances." They were halfway back to the ranch when the storm hit, a sudden, violent onslaught of wind and snow that reduced visibility to mere feet. Their horses grew skittish, struggling through deepening drifts. "There's a line shack ahead," Quinn shouted over the howling wind. "We need to wait this out." They found the small cabin nearly buried in snow. Inside, it was cold but dry, with a small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a single narrow bed. Quinn immediately set about starting a fire while Gwendolyn tended to the horses in the lean-to at the back. By the time she returned, stamping snow from her boots, the cabin had begun to warm. Quinn had laid out their provisions on the table: jerky, biscuits, and a flask of whiskey. "It's not much of a Christmas feast," he apologized. "It's perfect," she assured him, removing her wet outer garments. "We're alive and warm, that's enough." They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. As darkness fell, the wind seemed to intensify, rattling the cabin's shutters. "We'll have to stay the night," Quinn said, poking at the fire. "The trail will be impossible until morning." Gwendolyn glanced at the single bed. "I can sleep on the floor." "Don't be ridiculous. I'll take the floor. It's your cabin. And you're my guest." His tone brooked no argument. After some negotiation, they agreed to share the bed, fully clothed, with a blanket between them as a barrier. It was a practical solution to a practical problem, Gwendolyn told herself, ignoring the flutter in her stomach as Quinn extinguished the lamp, leaving only the glow of the fire. She lay rigid beside him, acutely aware of his presence, the warmth radiating through the blanket between them, the rhythm of his breathing. "Relax," he murmured in the darkness. "I don't bite." "I'm not afraid of you," she said truthfully. "What are you afraid of then?" She considered the question. "The future, I suppose. What happens when someone recognizes me, when I have to run again?" "You could stop running." His voice was soft in the darkness. "Face what happened. There might be those who'd speak for you." "Like who?" "Like me." He shifted, turning toward her. She could just make out his profile in the firelight. "I've been thinking, Collins had enemies, people he wronged who might testify to his character, support your claim of self-defense." Hope fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. "You do that?" "I would." He hesitated. "But there's something you should know first about me, about why I believe your story so readily." She turned to face him. "Tell me." Quinn took a deep breath. "Before I returned to run the ranch, I worked as a U.S. Marshal. My last assignment was investigating corruption in mining operations, including Collins' company." Gwendolyn sat up, staring down at him. "You knew him." "I knew of him. We were building a case against him when I was called home because of my father's illness. After he died, I resigned my commission to take over the ranch." Regret tinged his voice. "If I'd stayed, maybe your father would still be alive, or maybe you'd be dead too," she said softly. "Collins didn't hesitate to eliminate threats. That's the point." "I believe you because I know what kind of man he was." Quinn reached for her hand in the darkness. "When I saw that first wanted poster in town, I recognized your name. I'd seen it in reports about Collins' land acquisitions. I knew something wasn't right. So you hired me to, what? Investigate." "I hired you because you needed help. The rest." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "The rest happened on its own." "What do you mean?" Even in the dim light, she could see his smile. "I mean, I didn't plan on caring about you, Gwendolyn Hayes, but here we are," her breath caught. "And where exactly is that?" Instead of answering, Quinn leaned forward, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. He paused, his face inches from hers, giving her the chance to pull away. When she didn't, he closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. When they parted, Gwendolyn found herself trembling, not from fear but from the overwhelming tide of emotions washing through her. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Redemption," Quinn said, echoing their conversation by the fire. "It's not about deserving, it's about forgiveness. Others, yes, but mostly your own." She rested her forehead against his. "I'm not sure I know how to forgive myself." "Then let me help you learn." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Gwendolyn allowed herself to be swept away by the current of feelings she'd held at bay for so long. They returned to the ranch the following day to find Martha beside herself with worry. The storm had been the worst in years, taking down trees and blocking roads throughout the territory. Quinn explained their delay matter-of-factly, though Gwendolyn couldn't meet Martha's eyes, certain the older woman would read the truth in her face that something fundamental had shifted between her and Quinn during that night in the line shack. In the days that followed, they maintained their public distance, but private moments became charged with new meaning, fingers brushing while passing dishes at dinner, lingering glances across rooms. whispered conversations by the fire after Martha retired. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with the entire ranch staff, Quinn asked Gwendolyn to accompany him on a walk. The night was clear and cold, the snow crunching beneath their boots as they made their way to a small rise overlooking the ranch. "It's beautiful," Gwendolyn said, gazing at the starlit landscape. "I have something for you." Quinn withdrew a small package from his coat pocket. "Merry Christmas." Inside the carefully wrapped parcel, Gwendolyn found a delicate silver hair comb adorned with tiny sapphires, the very one she had admired in the general store. "Quinn," she breathed, "it's too much. It reminded me of your eyes." He took the comb from her and gently placed it in her hair, which she had begun wearing loose around the ranch. "Perfect," she reached into her own pocket. "I have something for you too, it's not much." Her gift to him was a hand-stitched bookmark made from a scrap of leather, engraved with a line from Tennyson, his favorite poet. "To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." "It's perfect," he said, tracing the letters with his finger. "Thank you." He tucked the bookmark carefully into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, then drew her into his arms. "I've been thinking about your situation." "Oh," she looked up at him, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "I've written to some former colleagues in the Marshal's service. Without mentioning you, I inquired about reopening the investigation into Collins. There's interest, especially with new leadership in the territorial government." Hope sparked within her. "What does that mean for me?" "It means there might be a path forward. If we can prove Collins was corrupt, that he threatened your father, it could support a claim of self-defense." Quinn's hands tightened on her waist. "It's a risk, but it could mean freedom, Gwendolyn, real freedom." The possibility was almost too much to comprehend. "And if it doesn't work?" "Then we'll face that together." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Gwendolyn Hayes. Whatever happens, whatever path we take, I want to walk it with you." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I love you too, but I'm afraid." "Fear's just a feeling," he murmured, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "It doesn't have to decide your fate." As snowflakes began to fall gently around them, Quinn sealed his promise with a kiss, and Gwendolyn allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that redemption might be possible after all. The new year brought change to the Z-Bar. Quinn's letters to his former Marshal colleagues yielded responses, setting in motion a quiet investigation into Collins' affairs. Meanwhile, word reached them that the wanted posters for Gwendolyn Hayes had been removed from nearby towns, a small victory, though she remained cautious. In February, a visitor arrived at the ranch, a clean-cut man named James Forrester, who identified himself as a special investigator for the U.S. Marshal's Service. Quinn welcomed him openly, but warned Gwendolyn to remain in the background during his stay. "He doesn't know about you yet," Quinn explained the night before Forrester's arrival. "I need to understand his intentions first." "Do you trust him?" she asked. "I trust that he wants to build a case against Collins' network. Whether that benefits you remains to be seen." Forrester stayed 3 days, spending long hours in conversation with Quinn. On the final evening, Quinn invited him to dinner at the main house, where Gwendolyn served them as Martha's assistant, keeping her eyes downcast and her responses minimal. After the meal, Quinn suggested that Martha and Gwendolyn retire early, a clear dismissal that Gwendolyn reluctantly obeyed. But instead of going to her room, she lingered in the shadowed hallway, listening. "You've been dancing around something since you arrived, James," Quinn was saying. "What is it you really want to know?" Forrester's voice was measured. "There are rumors, Quinn, about a woman staying at your ranch. My cousin, Gwendolyn, you met her tonight. Is that who she is? Or is she Gwendolyn Hayes, wanted for the murder of Nathaniel Collins?" Gwendolyn's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. "That's quite an accusation," Quinn said evenly. "It's not an accusation, it's a question." Forrester's chair scraped as he leaned forward. "Listen, Quinn, we've known each other a long time. I'm not here to make trouble. The investigation into Collins is revealing exactly what you suggested: land theft, bribery, intimidation. The man was a criminal. Then why are you asking about Gwendolyn Hayes?" Because if she killed Collins for the reasons I suspect to avenge her father, then her testimony could be valuable. And in return, the charges against her might be reconsidered. Quinn was silent for a long moment. Hypothetically speaking, what kind of reconsideration are we talking about? Potentially a full pardon, but it would require her to come forward, testify publicly. That's a significant risk, hypothetically, Forrester sighed. I can't make guarantees, Quinn, but I can tell you this: the territorial governor is looking to make an example of corrupt officials. If Hayes helps bring down Collins' network, he'll be inclined to show mercy. Gwendolyn couldn't bear to hear more. She slipped away to her room, mind racing. A pardon would mean freedom, a chance at a normal life. But testifying meant exposure, vulnerability, the possibility of prison or worse if things went wrong. She was still awake when Quinn knocked softly on her door hours later. When she opened it, his expression was grave. "You heard," he said. She nodded. "It's your decision," he told her, entering the room and closing the door behind him. "I won't pressure you." "What would you do?" she asked. He considered the question carefully. "I'd fight, not just for myself, but for your father and everyone else Collins wronged." He took her hands in his. "But I'm not the one who would be risking everything. What if it goes wrong? Then I'll still be by your side." He raised her hands to his lips. "Whatever you decide." Gwendolyn stared into his eyes, searching for doubt and finding none. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need." "Forrester leaves tomorrow, but he's given me a way to contact him when you're ready." Sleep eluded her that night as she weighed her options. By dawn, she had made her decision. She found Quinn in the stables, preparing to ride out with Forrester. "I'll do it," she said without preamble. "I'll testify." Relief and concern warred on Quinn's face. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted. "But I'm tired of running, tired of hiding who I am. If there's a chance to clear my name, I have to take it." Quinn pulled her into his arms, heedless of Forrester's imminent arrival. "I'll be with you every step. Promise me one thing," she whispered against his chest. "If it goes badly, if they try to hang me, don't watch. Ride away. Remember me as I am now." His arms tightened almost painfully around her. "Nothing's going to happen to you. I won't allow it." Forrester's reaction to meeting the real Gwendolyn Hayes was controlled surprise followed by professional courtesy. He asked direct questions about Collins, her father, and the events leading to the shooting, taking meticulous notes. "You realize this won't be easy," he warned. "The trial will be public. Collins still has friends in high places." "I understand," she said. "I just want the truth to be known." "The truth can be a double-edged sword, Miss Hayes." "So is justice," she replied, "but I'm willing to take that risk." The preparations for the trial consumed the next 2 months. Gwendolyn remained at the ranch, but now lived openly as herself, no longer hiding behind the facade of Quinn's cousin. She gave detailed statements to Forrester and his team, reliving painful memories and struggling through nights plagued by nightmares of gallows and prison cells. Through it all, Quinn was her anchor. He held her when the fear became overwhelming, reminded her of her strength when doubt crept in, and never once suggested turning back. As spring began to transform the landscape, greening the pastures and bringing wildflowers to the hills, the date for the trial was set: April 15, 1876, in the territorial capital. A week before they were to depart, Quinn took Gwendolyn for a ride to their favorite spot overlooking the ranch. "I wanted to give you something," he said as they dismounted, "before all this begins." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This belonged to my mother," he explained, tipping a ring into his palm, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "She made me promise to give it only to the woman I couldn't imagine living without." Gwendolyn's breath caught. "Quinn." He dropped to one knee in the spring grass. "I know the timing isn't ideal. I know we face challenges ahead. But I also know that I love you, Gwendolyn Hayes, and whatever the future holds, I want to face it as your husband." His eyes, bluer than the April sky above them, held hers. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Even knowing what I've done, what I might yet face." "Especially knowing those things. They're part of who you are, and I love all of you." He took her trembling hand. "Say yes. Let me stand beside you, not just as your defender, but as your husband." Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Quinn Zimmerman, I will marry you. The ring fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. As Quinn rose to kiss her, Gwendolyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever happened at the trial, she would face it knowing she was loved, knowing she had someone to fight for. They were married 2 days later in the ranch house with Martha, Silas, and Hector as witnesses. The ceremony was simple, the celebration quiet, but to Gwendolyn, it was perfect. That night, as husband and wife, they shared not just a bed but their hopes, fears, and dreams, their bodies joining as their lives had, with tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. No regrets? Quinn asked as they lay tangled together in the moonlight. Gwendolyn traced the line of his jaw, only that we didn't do this sooner. The journey to the territorial capital took 4 days. As they approached the city, Gwendolyn's anxiety mounted. The familiar weight of being hunted settled back over her, despite Forrester's assurances of protection. They checked into a hotel under Quinn's name, the gold band on Gwendolyn's finger offering a small measure of legitimacy and protection. That evening, Forrester visited with final instructions. The prosecutor will try to paint you as cold-blooded, he warned. He'll emphasize that you shot Collins in public in broad daylight. Your job is to make the jury understand why the threat to your life, your father's murder, the corruption that left you no other option. Gwendolyn nodded, her mouth dry. And if they don't believe me? Forrester's expression was grim. Then we appeal to the governor, but let's focus on winning this first. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the trial. Curious onlookers, reporters, and what seemed like half the town crowded the gallery. Gwendolyn sat at the defense table beside Quinn, and the lawyer Forrester had arranged, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. The prosecution presented its case first, a straightforward account of how Gwendolyn Hayes had confronted Nathaniel Collins on the main street of Redemption Creek and shot him 3 times. Witnesses testified to seeing her flee the scene, to the wanted posters that had circulated for months afterward. When it was the defense's turn, Forrester's preparation proved invaluable. Former business associates of Collins testified to his unethical practices. A bank clerk admitted to falsifying loan documents under pressure. The judge who had ruled against Thomas Hayes was revealed to have received substantial gifts from Collins. Then it was Gwendolyn's turn to testify. As she took the stand, she sought Quinn's eyes in the gallery, drawing strength from his steady gaze. Miss Hayes, or should I say Mrs. Zimmerman, the prosecutor began, did you shoot Nathaniel Collins on the morning of October 3, 1875? I did, she answered clearly. Did you plan this killing in advance? I planned to confront him with evidence of his crimes. The killing was, she swallowed. It happened when he drew his gun on me. So you claim self-defense, I claim justice, she said firmly. Nathaniel Collins murdered my father, stole our land through fraud, and threatened my life when I gathered evidence against him. When I confronted him, he reached for his weapon. I was faster. For hours, the prosecutor tried to break her story, to twist her words into an admission of premeditated murder. Gwendolyn held firm, her voice steady as she recounted the events leading to that fateful morning, her father's death, her months of gathering evidence, her desperation when legitimate channels of justice proved corrupt. And what did you do after shooting Mr. Collins? The prosecutor asked. I ran, she admitted. I knew his influence extended to the local law. I wouldn't receive a fair trial, so you became a fugitive. I became a survivor. When the questioning finally ended, Gwendolyn returned to her seat, emotionally drained but strangely at peace. She had spoken her truth. Whatever happened now was beyond her control. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Gwendolyn and Quinn waited in their hotel room, alternating between anxious pacing and moments of forced normalcy, playing cards, reading aloud to each other, making plans for a future that might never come. On the morning of the 3rd day, they were summoned back to the courthouse. The gallery was even more crowded than before, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor, the foreman replied, standing. Gwendolyn felt Quinn's hand close over hers beneath the table, his grip almost painful in its intensity. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Gwendolyn Hayes Zimmerman, not guilty. A roar went up from the gallery. Gwendolyn swayed in her seat, disbelief washing over her. "Order," the judge commanded, banging his gavel. When the room quieted, he continued, "On the charge of manslaughter, guilty, Your Honor." The breath froze in Gwendolyn's lungs. Manslaughter still carried a prison sentence, years of separation from Quinn, from the life they'd begun to build. "Very well," the judge said. "The court thanks the jury for their service. Sentencing will be held tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. As they were escorted from the courtroom, Gwendolyn's mind raced. "What does this mean?" she whispered to Quinn. "It means we have a chance," he replied, his face set with determination. "Forrester's already gone to speak with the governor." That night was the longest of Gwendolyn's life. She and Quinn clung to each other in their hotel bed, making love with desperate intensity, as though trying to store up a lifetime of memories in a single night. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Quinn murmured into her hair, "remember that I love you. That I will wait for you however long it takes." 5 years, she whispered. "That's the minimum for manslaughter. 5 years away from you, from the ranch." 5 years is nothing," he said fiercely. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." Morning came too soon. They dressed in silence, Gwendolyn in the same modest blue dress she had worn throughout the trial, Quinn in his best suit. They walked to the courthouse hand in hand, heads held high. The sentencing was brief. Gwendolyn stood before the judge, Quinn at her side, as her fate was pronounced. "Gwendolyn Hayes Zimmerman, you have been found guilty of manslaughter in the death of Nathaniel Collins. While the jury has acknowledged the extenuating circumstances of your case, the taking of a human life cannot go unpunished." The judge adjusted his spectacles. "It is therefore the sentence of this court that you be confined to the territorial prison for a term of 3 years. 3 years. Less than she had feared, but still an eternity to contemplate. However," the judge continued, "in light of new evidence concerning Mr. Collins' criminal activities, and at the recommendation of the territorial governor, this court has decided to commute your sentence to time served and 2 years probation, during which time you will report monthly to the marshal's office nearest your residence." The words didn't register at first. When they did, Gwendolyn's knees nearly buckled. Quinn's arm went around her waist, supporting her. "You understand the terms of your sentence, Mrs. Zimmerman?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she managed. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Then this court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, in the bright spring sunshine, Gwendolyn turned to Quinn in disbelief. "Is it over? Truly over?" His smile was radiant. "It's over. You're free." "How? Who convinced the governor?" "Forrester had help," Quinn admitted. "I may have called in every favor I was owed from my marshal days, and—" he looked slightly sheepish. "I may have mentioned that my wife is expecting our first child." Gwendolyn's eyes widened. "Quinn Zimmerman, that's a lie, is it?" His gaze dropped to her midsection. "You've been ill every morning for a week, and by my count, it's been almost 2 months since that night in the lined shack." Her hand flew to her stomach. She hadn't connected the signs, had been too preoccupied with the trial to notice the changes in her own body. "You think?" "I think," he said, gathering her into his arms, "that we should head home and start building that future we've been planning." They left the capital that afternoon, eager to put the city and its courtrooms behind them. As they rode side by side, Gwendolyn felt lighter than she had in years, the burden of her past finally lifted. "You were right," she said as they made camp that evening. "About what?" Quinn asked, building a small fire. "Redemption. It's not just for saints." He smiled, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Told you so." "Yes, you did." She moved to sit beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You said then you ain't met me yet, and you were right about that too." He wrapped his arm around her, drawing her close. "We redeemed each other, Gwendolyn. That's what love does." As summer bloomed across the Z-Bar, so did Gwendolyn. Her pregnancy, confirmed by the doctor in town, progressed smoothly. Quinn was attentive to the point of hovering, much to Martha's amusement and Gwendolyn's occasional exasperation. "I'm with child, not made of porcelain." she protested one evening when he insisted on carrying her up the stairs. "Humor me," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I've waited a long time for this for you, for our family." Their son, Thomas Quinn Zimmerman, was born on a crisp December morning in 1876, exactly 1 year after that fateful night in the lined shack. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit, evident from his first lusty cries. "He's perfect," Quinn whispered, cradling his son with careful hands. "He is," Gwendolyn agreed, exhausted but radiant. "My father would have loved him. He'll know all about his grandfather," Quinn promised. "The good man he was named for. As Thomas grew, so did the Z-bar." Quinn's shrewd management, combined with Gwendolyn's head for figures, expanded their holdings and their reputation. By the time their daughter, Eleanor, joined the family 2 years later, the Zimmerman Ranch was one of the most respected in the territory. Gwendolyn's monthly reports to the marshal became a formality, then ceased altogether when her probation ended. The story of her confrontation with Collins faded from public memory, replaced by her reputation as a capable rancher's wife and mother. On the 5th anniversary of the trial, Quinn surprised her with a journey not to the territorial capital, but to Redemption Creek. "Are you sure?" he asked as they approached the town where it had all begun. "We don't have to do this." "I'm sure," she said, though her heart raced at the sight of the familiar buildings. Much had changed in 5 years, but the main street where she had confronted Collins looked eerily the same. They stopped first at the cemetery, where Gwendolyn laid flowers on her father's grave. "I brought someone to meet you, Pa," she said softly, as Thomas and Eleanor watched with solemn curiosity. Later, they visited the land that had once been the Hayes Ranch. The new owners, learning of their visit, invited them to dinner, a gesture of community that would have been unthinkable during Collins' reign. "Does it feel strange?" Quinn asked as they prepared to leave town the next morning. "Being back, not strange," Gwendolyn reflected, "more like." "Closing a circle, I came here seeking vengeance. I left a fugitive. Now I return as myself." Quinn's smile was tender as he helped her into the wagon. "And who is that exactly, this yourself?" She considered the question as they pulled away from Redemption Creek, her children dozing between them, the future stretching wide and promising before them. "I am Gwendolyn Hayes Zimmerman," she said finally. "Daughter, wife, mother, once an outlaw, now a rancher, flawed, forgiven, and free." Quinn reached across the sleeping children to take her hand, his touch as reassuring as it had been that first night by the fire, when she declared redemption beyond her reach. "That," he said, "sounds exactly right." As the wagon rolled forward, Redemption Creek receding behind them, Gwendolyn's thoughts turned not to the past but to the journey home to the Z-bar, to the life and love she had found when she least expected it, to the redemption she had achieved not through sainthood but through truth, courage, and the heart of a cowboy who had believed in second chances.